Welcome to rural Crossroads of Butler County. In this episode, we explore the story of Latham. When settlers arrived in Union Township and the area now known as Latham, they would have faced both the scarcity of trees and the rolling bluestem tallgrass of the Flint Hills. Alva Prosser, early settler, homesteaded the land on which Latham sits today.
The story goes that Latham was named by James N. Young, a railroad commissioner from Chicago and employee of the Frisco Railroad. Mr. Young named it in memory of his relative, Latham Young. The railroad went through the township in the early 1880s, helping to create and plat the town by 1885. Latham has had its fair share of hardships. Once a thriving trade center, its rural crossroads story highlights the common decline often seen in rural America.
So join us as we explore the rural crossroads of Latham.
One-room schools were once a common fixture of rural life. Not only were these buildings a place of education for area children, it was also a place where neighbors, often miles apart, could gather together for social activities, perhaps even church services. At one point, there were approximately 7 one-room schoolhouses in the Latham vicinity.
What would be known as Centerville School, and often referred to today as the Ellett School, was built in 1880 on the land of Colonel William Ellett. Located 8 miles to the west of Latham, Colonel Ellett, son of Civil War hero and future El Dorado citizen, Brigadier General Alfred Ellett, homesteaded a quarter section of land in 1874. That was a tough year for citizens of Butler County. First there was a drought, and then the locust plague that decimated crops and pasture.
The story goes that Ellett, around 1874, hired local men with teams and wagons to build a rock fence around his farm. This fence still stands today.
Colonel William Ellett served as director of the school from 1880 to 1895. Nell Hawley was the first teacher at a salary of $40 a month. Common for the time, Nell Hawley taught for 4 months in the first couple of years, which grew to 8 months a year. Centerville School closed its doors in 1942. The building was moved to town by the Latham Lions Club in 1980.
Settlers in the 1880s would have greatly desired the connectivity and opportunities trains brought to the community. Trains sped up transportation and trade. Latham once reported 4 passenger trains and 2 local freight trains a day. Latham quickly became a trade center. First hay shipments were the most popular at 400 cars a season. Then, the cattle industry, at one point 1,000 rail cars of cattle were shipped out each year. As an area trading center, the town transformed quickly. It is reported that Saturdays were days reserved for farmers to sell produce and for citizens to purchase supplies.
The Prohibition era of the 1920s and early 30s often brought ingenuity to those looking to skirt the law and imbibe alcohol. Legend goes that a Latham bootlegger heard that he couldn't be arrested by the federal government if his operation was on water. He built a house on a mound using stilts to support it. He dug a moat and a spring-filled lake formed. A plank connected his house to the shore. A patriotic man, he painted his house red, white, and blue. Creative, but his business was short-lived.
Smaller towns such as Latham often are faced with not only a declining population, but a declining church membership. However, the community of Latham, instead of disbanding and closing the doors of individual churches, opted to find a creative way to support all 3. Latham residents and congregation members raised funds for each church building and have taken turns each Sunday to have service at a different building. This traveling congregation, united with a common goal of faith and community, recognize these structures as more than a place of worship, but as a place where Latham's roots run deep. It is reported that the Methodist congregation was organized in 1872 in a homesteader's home, essentially Latham's first public institution.
One of the things that Latham used to be famous for, one of the last horse thieves in this part of the country was hung down east of Latham. They stole some horses over by Douglas and headed across the hills with them, and he camped out east of Latham in the hills all night, and vigilantes caught up and somehow tracked him out there. They held court right there and hung him about 10 miles east of Latham over there in the hills. And that's to this day is still called Dead Man Gulch. Good people, but they stuck home. Latham at one time was a pretty nice little town. I think you probably led in that book the businesses used to be there. And they started moving out of Latham during World War II. Most of those people worked on ranches and farms down there, and good paying jobs in Wichita. They moved into the cities, and Latham lost a lot of population then. Then in, I think it was in probably around 1970, they closed a school down there and unified at Leon and lost quite a bit more people then. And there's probably over half the houses in Latham when I moved down there that are gone now. Some moved out and some tore down, but it's not much town anymore. When I moved down there, they still had the railroad, and the railroad come right through the east part of town. So there was a lot of cattle loaded and went down the main streets. I was on one of the last cattle drives down Main Street of Latham. Just before they closed the railroad up, some people sent cattle up to go out on the Price Ranch by rail. And a guy from Atlanta and Larry Price and I drove those cattle through town, through the main street. And back then, the town, all the old stores were with big glass fronts. Them old cows saw those cows in those windows, and we never got them out of town. And there wasn't a window down there didn't have cow licks all over it. We was on the last cattle drive down the main streets of Latham. So that was one of my history things. And then you probably had heard about the explosion down there. I lost my wife in that explosion. And that hurt the town bad. They lost the whole downtown area. There was no buildings on the south side left standing. And there wasn't very many buildings on the north side, but some of them survived. But everything on the south side of the street was blowed up in that explosion. That hurt the little town real bad. The explosion was a sad, sad thing, both from the people that we lost and what it did to the town. And it could have been a lot worse. Eastern Star, they think the explosion was under the Lodge Hall and the restaurant. They had a common foundation between the two of them, just a firewall between them. And they think it was accumulation of propane under those. They never did figure out for sure where it come from. But the Eastern Star was meeting in the building next door, and the first women just pulled up out in front. If it had been 5 minutes later, they'd lost people in that Masonic Lodge too. Like I say, my wife and a friend run that restaurant, and I'd go down there and eat dinner every night. And I'd bought a new motorcycle, and I was getting it put together and all. And I picked up my tools and thought I'd better go down and eat dinner so I don't make the girls late. And I thought, well, I got time to work a little more. And I messed around a little more. And I picked up my tools the second time and put them away. And I thought, well, I'm going to do one more thing. And I went and did that. Picked up my tools, walked out the door of my shop, and I saw the whole downtown go up in the air. So it was a terrible thing, and it still is in my mind, what I saw. But, I knew it had to be bad, but I had no idea how bad it would be when I got down there. It was bad. And they were the best of friends, and they died together. But it was a sad thing, and the community never did really come back from that. They get great crowds down there at the restaurant. They have a great restaurant down there. It's just a little old country restaurant, but the food's great, and they serve a lot of fancy Italian dishes, which don't suit me too good. I'm a steak and potato guy, but they serve some great Italian food down there, and they really get crowds down there on Friday and Saturday night. It's standing room only, so it's a benefit to the town. It'd be awful dead if it wasn't for that restaurant. That kind of keeps the town together.
While many other Butler County communities have disappeared, Latham has survived for 135 years.
Join us in 2 weeks as we explore the rural crossroads of Beaumont.